my dear friends, welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing great and working on things that inspire you and make you happy. In this video, I'll be sharing with you 11 basic watercolor techniques that everyone who ever wants to use watercolors should know. Or if you're currently using watercolors, you can still learn from these and add these to your bag. And this will make your watercolor journey more fun and enjoyable. So let's get started. For this, you will need a scale or ruler, whatever you want to say it, a pencil, watercolors obviously, and watercolor paper. I'm using 250 GSM cold pressed paper from my sketchbook. You can use whatever paper you have available. And there are some other things that we also need, and I will talk about them as we further proceed into the video. To start off, I'm going to divide my paper into the small boxes and we'll work with that. As you can see here, I'm using two basic colors, the red and the blue. You can use any blue or any red, it doesn't really matter right now. And I'm diluting the blue with lots of water for my first technique, that is a very basic, very classic wet on wet technique that I think everyone who has ever used watercolor knows, but we are going to start from the basics. So let's get started. For this technique, I use a brush to apply a thin coat of water to my paper, and then we add our colors. That's what makes this technique unique and fun. But this appears to be a complication for some people as the flow of color is not controlled and it bleeds into the paper and into each other. But don't be intimidated by that process. Practice this technique, and for the tip, damp the paper where you want the color to appear. Don't damp it all the way. Damp only the part that you want to color so that you can control it in some ways. Moving on to the next technique that I'll share with you, it's dry brushing. Always use a tough, dry synthetic brush for this technique and use the paint from the tube and not the diluted form. So you don't want to add any water for this technique. This technique is very good to add details like grass, like twigs, and so much more. So have fun with this technique and see how I do this and try to work in that manner. And always remember, for watercolors, the kitchen towel is your best friend. So if you have sometimes excess or you want to pick up some color, use the kitchen towel. Don't shy away from it. The third technique that I'm sharing with you is called as salting. It's just as the name suggests, we add salt to our painted surface. For this, paint the part that you want to work with in dark colors and then add salt. Since salt absorbs the paint, it creates beautiful patterns. For that, we need to let the part dry and then we can remove the salt to reveal the pattern and see how it works. But remember to use the dark colors because then it creates the patterns and then only we can see that because it will create a contrast. Here, as you can see, I'm using a very beautiful deep purple which I got from mixing the blue and the red, and as you can see, I'm increasing the contrast slowly. So that's how you do it. Now I'm adding the salt and see how it kind of absorbs the paint and it creates that pool. So let this dry and then we'll see the results. After that is my favorite technique called as the lift off. As the name itself suggests, it means the lifting off of the paint from the pre-painted surface. This is such a fun technique and the one that I recommend everyone to try at least once. It's very fun too. And you can be as creative as you want and create as much shapes and anything you want with that lift off. But mostly in my paintings, I use it for my cloud paintings. You can lift off the paint in two ways. First, we can use clean damp brush, but the lift off from that is not so much pronounced. It's quite blurry. And then we have another technique, another way of doing the lift off rather, and it's the use of the paper towel. For that, we use the kitchen paper towel and lift off using that. And most important thing that we need to understand here is that amount of pressure that we are adding. If we apply more pressure, the lift off will be, there will be more paint that will be lifted off. And if we apply less pressure, that's the opposite. We get a light paint lift off, and that's how we control it. For the fifth technique, we'll be using rubbing alcohol to create beautiful round patterns. So for that, we paint the surface first, and then as the paint is damp, we add the rubbing alcohol dropwise. This technique is useful to create beautiful background patterns for anything you want, like cards, postcards, anything you can use it. So this is how it works. Now we have another classic technique which is called wet and dry. In this technique, we paint the paper and let it dry before adding another layer of wet paint. And this can go on and on. We can add as many layers as we want. This technique is useful to create depth to a painting, and it's also useful to add little details into the painting after it's dry. So we have to wait for the surface to dry first, and then I'll show you how it's done. In this next technique, we paint the surface of paper and then we use a plastic wrapper. Crinkle the plastic wrapper as much as you want to give the beautiful patterns to the surface. Place it on the paper, wet paper, and add some weight to make it stay there and let it dry. I'll show you the results after it dries. Then we have another beautiful technique from watercolor called as glazing. In this technique, we paint the paper using any colors and let it dry. After drying, add the next shape and let that dry, and you can go on and on and on. Remember to keep the paint very diluted to make it appear transparent. And after this dries, I'll show you how it works. So now we have another technique that's called as sponging. For that, as the name suggests, take a sponge, add some paint to it, and try dabbing it on the paper. This will create beautiful patterns. It can also be used to make like faraway trees or fog, something like that. Also, there's another way to use the sponge, that is to make it damp. For that, after that, you can make clouds or some things like that. Try that also. I'm not shown it here, but that's also a way to use the sponge. As the first circle has dried from our glazing technique, I'm adding another circle. This one is in another color also. And you will see how the circle that's in the far back will appear. It's so beautiful. Just wait and see the results. Next, we have splattering. This is the easiest technique that I've shown here. You must have seen this yourself or used it yourself. Here we have two ways of splattering. First, we have the finger method that I'm showing right now. In this, we take the brush and fill it with the paint and use the finger as I've shown you to splatter the paint onto the paper. Then we have the second technique. For that, we use two brushes. The first brush is filled with paint and it's tapped against the handle of the other brush. This gives us another kind of splatter. For the first one, we get the fine splatter. In the second, we get the blobs. It's quite big. we don't get that fine splatter. So both can be used, and that's it for the splattering. After that, I'm showing you the wet on dry technique. So my paint surface is quite dry. Now I'm adding like mountain into it using a wet paint. So this is how it works. This is how the wet on dry technique works. We can let this also dry and add another layer of paint to make mountains, another set of mountains. That's how this works. For the glazing, another set of our round circle has dried, and I'm adding another circle now. So see how that works. All three circles, they are almost all visible due to the transparency of the paint. So, but still we can see the glazing. This can be done in many other ways. You can add glaze anywhere, not like this only. You can add literally anywhere. You have to just dry the paint. Next, we have the negative painting. In the negative painting, the paint surface that we want to stand out, that is the lightest, and the background, that is the dark. This all creates the contrast and makes the thing that we want to show an audience to appear to pop. For example, here I'm trying to make a moon and the sky setting. So for that, I'm not painting the moon per se, but I'm painting the sky to make the moon appear. It's kind of like that. It's like you don't paint it, but it still appears. So the background should be very dark, and the thing that we are painting, it has to be light. That's how the negative painting works. So now for the last part, let's reveal the plastic and take it off and see how the pattern is done. Oh my god, it's so pretty. It's always unexpected and it creates new patterns every time. Also, I'm taking off the salt and see how that works. Isn't it pretty? So I hope you try all these techniques yourself and see what you like and create fun paintings using these techniques. So that's it from my side today. I hope you loved the video and enjoy it. If you did, kindly subscribe for the channel as it helps me grow. Thank you so much for watching.